like, she's going to laugh at my Excel document.
That's a huge statement.
Why couldn't Ainsley do bowling?
That's Joe.
That's Rooster.
And this is the Together We Shall podcast. What's up, man?
What's happening?
We just spent like 12 minutes talking about all sorts of things we should have been recording, but
Yeah.
that is what it is. How you doing, bro? What's happening, man?
Man, I'm good. It's that busy time of the year. It's the fall marathon season, and for us, that's our big one in Marine Corps Marathon, and that's usually my most stressful time of the year. It's stressful for me to make it happy for hundreds, so I accept that burden.
In our past, like,
it's probably not the right word, burden.
Well, it's the burden of leadership. It's the burden of responsibility. It's the burden of. It's a burden.
It's the burden of silly questions.
What is the silliest question you've received in all of your Marine Corps Marathon, Ainsley's Angels head honcho days?
Does the hotel have coffee, and what kind of coffee? And then if I know the height of the parking garage.
Okay, that's fair. I thought there was one year, and we should put this in context for the listener. Joe is basically corralling 100 to 200 people who are either riders, caregivers, or runners, and in some cases leaders, to come to Washington, D.C., and probably half of them have never been there before. So he gets all sorts of questions. The one I thought I remembered someone asking at one point in our lives was, hey, does Washington, D.C. have Starbucks?
Yeah, that was who. It might have been like Karen from Oregon too, someone who's just like used to fancy ones. And I mean, now the big one is like the whole real ID. I'm like, I don't know. Like, I'm not the government.
Yeah.
I don't know. I don't know the restrictions of that.
What I can tell you is if you're flying to Washington, D.C., you have to have a real ID or a passport or a military ID.
Yeah.
But anyway, yeah. So, yeah, now you mentioned the fall season and it's crazy and it's busy. Dude, I got to go to the Air Force Marathon for the first time, and I haven't really captured any of that and to share with the world. But the shortest version of it is it's the first time Ainsley's Angels got to go do that. We had 21 riders partake in the half and full marathons, which start at the same time on Saturday morning. And it's a long story how it came to be, but I went from being honored to be their guest speaker at their pasta dinner the night before to actually like emceeing the actual event. Like, welcome to the finish line and announcing people and the whole thing, because the main person got sick. So I had to kind of fill in. And so I'm doing the full Air Force Marathon award ceremony with the Lieutenant General in charge of Wright Pat Air Force Base. Like, how did that happen so fast?
I don't know how it happened, other than the person getting sick. But, like, that is something that, like, that's your element. And I love that for you, as you like to say. But you know who else is a good MC, and I learned this in Oregon, is our guest.
Is that right? Tell me more. Oh, I want to hear about this story. So I guess
we got all of the Right to Run partners got, I don't know, 5-ish minutes to like explain the organization. Well, our guest had her right hand there, and they took like 15 minutes, and they had people dancing. There was an exercise. It was
okay.
And I don't know. I want to say it was ad lib, and they didn't like rehearse this.
Yeah.
But it was entertaining, and I still don't know how to play the game that we played correctly.
And I want to tell you, like, I can relate to that because when I first met our guest, it was 2021 in Austin, and we ended up on a panel together. And at one point, I remember she was bantering and going so awesome with her narrative that I was like, I want to dance. Like, can we get up and dance? And before I could even say that, she was like leading the whole audience in chants and things. It was impressive. So, friends, without further ado, our guest this morning comes to us from, well, she's going to tell us where she's from. So, Maurelhena, welcome to the podcast, the Together We Shall podcast. You got to tell us, like, where are you? For some of us, like, how do you correctly pronounce your name, and why do you think that you are on this Together We Shall podcast? Come on in here, girl. Let's go.
Well, first off, thank you. It is such an honor and just a delight to kick off my morning with the Together We Shall podcast, and with you, Joe and Rooster. You all got me cracking up. So the correct way to say my name is Maurelhena. So it's two names in one, Maurelhena. It is also a Brazilian name, so there's another way to say it, and that's Moilinha. But I'll leave it with Maurelhena, which is probably a little bit simpler, even for me when I was growing up.
Well, I appreciate the grace you just gave us because you said even for me, and all I was thinking about, I'm just going to go with Maria Elena for you English speakers, and
Right.
and Rooster, you're still messing it up. You still are
Right.
messing it up there.
Yeah.
But thanks for the grace.
Two of us are educated in the South.
Right.
But that's funny because Brazil is like further south. Didn't you say Brazil? Is that what you just said?
Yeah, so my dad is from Brazil, and so he named me Maurelhena Gloria Walles.
Oh my God, that's beautiful.
God,
Say it
thank you.
again. Say it again.
Maurelhena Gloria Walles.
Man, dude, I love that. So your last name is Walles, not Walls.
Correct, Walles. So the S
How
is
many
the Z.
how many people in New England say Walls?
Yep, yes, yes, yes.
So that brings me to my next question. Like, where are you coming to us from? Where are you physically located, and why are you there?
So live and direct, New York City, and that is where I was born and where Equity Design does 100% of the work.
Equity Design. So now I'm going to go right with this one. Why do you think you're a guest on the Together We Shall podcast? Of all the 60 people that we've invited to join us, why are you one of them?
Well, I think, I'm not a DJ, but I'm going to rewind a bit. And so in meeting you, Rooster, 4 years ago, there was a genuine connection and, because of your genuine spirit. So all of the conversations that we had was just 100% real. And then again, not a DJ, but I'm going to fast forward and in comes Joe. And it's the same thing, the consistency with the conversation and just the real genuine flow and a genuine love for the work that we do.
That was nice. Thank you.
And there you go. The podcast is over in 7 minutes. I mean, that's
Well,
perfect.
so
you know what though? When Rooster you both went to Austin, and Rooster came back and was like, "Oh, I met all these people." Like he said that, and then I didn't meet you in person from there. Right, the rewind to fast forward 2 years later, and wasn't it? Or 3 years later, when we were in New York for the marathon last year, which was a hustle and bustle. And then I think this year, when we were in Oregon, is when we really got to connect, partially because we were shoved in the back of a car for 4 hours, crammed up. So we got to spend some real quality time together.
Yes.
But yeah, the genuineness and like the way that you speak and like present is it's captivating. It's very fun to listen and watch.
Thank you.
We want to set the conditions for you to be able to speak and captivate our audience today. So we have to figure out what topics can get you going. But I'll tell you this too. There's never been there's not been too many guests, if any, that me and Joe both know but have never been in the same space with that person together. In other words, in this case, you and Joe have had your moments in Oregon and New York, and you and I in Austin, but never have the three of us been in the same room. And that's odd, very odd.
Yeah.
So you were able to formulate your opinions and establish your relationship and connection with me in Austin, and then do the same thing with Joe without me overbearing and commandeering the conversation, which is kind of unique too. Bullying. But anyway, cool.
Wait, can I just go back to the Oregon? So a couple of weeks ago, so we took a trip because friends wanted to see the Goonies and where it was shot, and I pretty much just went around along for the ride because you want to stay with good people and good company. And got to have this experience and have really good continue with a good conversation. And then fast forward, it was I think the week before last, Goonies was on TV, and just the memory of like, man, some good people. And that was just a good moment.
Pretty
It
cool.
was, yeah. And like those, doesn't matter if you are surrounded, or in this case, like crammed with good people in a vehicle, like you can have I mean, we talked like the silliest, dumbest things to like when you gave us a history lesson on like the Harlem Renaissance, and like we all were like into it like it was a documentary, like holy cow, all these things that like others didn't know, and to include your acting career.
Right.
Yeah.
So we're talking about we're talking about Oregon, but we haven't mentioned on. So I think we should put the common denominator in the room for those listening. On Running, which I don't know if they still call themselves On Running. Where's the name of the business now? On.
Yeah, just on.
On. Ticker ONON, publicly traded company, international apparel company out of Switzerland. Is that right so far? Yeah. They established a program called Right to Run, and you can go to their website. You can read all about all of the charities that they picked. But initially, there was like 5 of us in North America, 5 charities that they sought out and brought together in the running event that happens down in Austin. And that's what we were referring to in 2011. And as time has gone on, they have expanded the number of charities that's part of their Right to Run program in the Americas and globally. And I don't know the current number, but it's definitely less than 20 worldwide of charities that they've really invested into time, energy, monetarily. And what's beautiful is Equity Design and Ainsley's Angels of America are 2 of those very few charities. So I wanted to put that context out there for Right to Run and how we even got to know each other. But that's really a cool kind of transition that I'd like to take us right into is Equity Design. At its core, what you've created as the founder and CEO of Equity Design is beautiful. And can you give us all an understanding for maybe what it is and how you got to it to jump into this thing?
Yeah, thank you for that. So Equity Design, we're a social enterprise, which means what makes us unique in our business structure is that our bottom line is driven by our mission. And so what I did was I started to think about the impact and did about a year of discovery. And in that year of discovery, I realized that in communities with high health disparities, there was also low physical activity engagement. And so it wasn't so much around the direct service end, it was around the built environment and the infrastructure, and then just the lack of joy for physical activity. So what we started to think about was, well, how do we collaborate with the Department of Education, Department of Transportation, Department of Health, all of these entities, and really use an equity lens and get an idea from community members around why they're not engaging in physical activity. And it went back from everything around safety to lack of access to just not having enough time, and then also around built environments. And so over the past 5 years or so, we've really had an opportunity to reconstruct environments. There's going to be a ribbon cutting ceremony in Brownsville, actually on Friday, where we redesigned their outdoor play area and made it more inclusive, not only just for the students, but for the teachers, for the families, and the larger Brownsville community. And so those are things that we do. Even though we're ingrained in physical activity, we really take a deeper look, a microscopic look, actually into why physical activity is not occurring in under-resourced communities.
Joe, I don't know about you, but I got 20 questions without even thinking about the questions. So many. That was beautiful explanation. Let's jump into Miller time. Miller time is that point in the show where I invite you to grab your favorite beverage, whatever it is, and take a sip from it as we digest what we just learned. Oh my goodness. Okay. So Maria,
what's the what's the like your punchline or whatever you aim to bridge the gap between
health, wealth, and life expectancy.
Yeah.
Goodness
I like
gracious.
that.
Okay. Goodness. So do I want to ask questions about the execution, or do I want to ask questions about the why? Why did you create this? Not just because you noticed that people in underserved communities or high health disparity communities weren't getting a chance to move or to have access to physical activity. Not that answer. Like the deeper microscopic why.
So the deeper microscopic why actually goes back to, this isn't Back to the Future, but I'm gonna take you back to sixth grade. And I just knew my parents knew, especially my mom, that I was just active. I was going to be an athlete. I was destined for that. I think the trouble that I had was that athletics was looked upon as, okay, you have the superpower to be physically active, to be strong, but your classroom and your grades are not always in your favor. And so even though I use athleticism to be able to get me to college, and to, with the sport that I do, track and field, I shied away from like letting that be my first superpower. And so, but the more that I did other things, the more I really started to have this love for coaching, for for just movement, for helping other people find joy in movement. So the biggest why was, understanding that you can balance, health, wealth, all of these things with physical activity, that you can balance athleticism, that it doesn't mean that because, the stereotype was if you're an athlete, you're not intelligent. But actually, athleticism is a form of intelligence. Kinetics is a form of intelligence. So when I graduated, sixth grade, eighth grade, it was said that I would go on to be an athlete. And I thought, damn, that's it. It's great to be an athlete, but there's so much more to me. And I got pigeonholed, and I celebrated it, but I just knew there was more to me. So that's my biggest why.
I have never stopped to think about the psyche on a person who is told that you're an amazing athlete and you're the best athlete and you're going to crush it and you're going to go to college on a scholarship and you're going to set records. And the fact that never is it anything else but you're a great athlete. I never stopped to think about that. And how, what happens when you lose your vehicle? What happens when you lose the ability to set the records? And how far of a downfall that can be to one's psyche and motivation.
Absolutely. Wow. Absolutely. And it also helped me realize that, even then what came into it was this stereotypical role of, to be an athlete, to be a woman of color and an athlete. And again, just get pigeonholed there, and no one really talk about these other intelligence or these other interests. And so, literally, figuratively speaking, running from that image, only to come back to it, but me having more control in changing the narrative.
Yeah, powerful. How are you changing the narrative today in New York City? Because correct me if I recall wrongly, but you're an educator, a coach at local schools. Like, how does all that come into play?
Yeah, I think the first superpower that I realized is that when I walk into a space, the young girls and those that identify as girls look at me. It's almost like we're talking to each other. There's a sense of happiness and joy because I look like them and they looked like me. And so, and I didn't have that when I was growing up. So to walk into a space and to be recognized, to be seen because I see them, that is huge, and just brings like all this joy to my heart. And to do that as an educator and as a coach, And especially I know the gap that exists around girls and women, girls and young girls of color, around physical activity and sports and being exposed to that. So to be this leader and to walk in and to exemplify and exhilarate that confidence, that came from me being an athlete. That came from me knowing that there was an absence of a presence of someone that looked like me. So I take it and with pride and with humility, being an educator, a coach, and a leader.
I told you, and like, and for the listeners now, we're 20 minutes in, and people are like, "Damn, I want you just listen to her talk for hours and days on end." Do you think that like being, and I think you said pigeonholed is a good term, like being pigeonholed into athletics shaped the person you are today?
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely, because there were other stories that I took in and then just personally documented, of women and women of color who felt the same way. Um, but sometimes, you try to find an avenue to use your voice, and it's difficult. And so, it helped shaped me, on the track, giving me the confidence, but it also helped shape me off the track. So in the boardrooms, making sure that I have a seat at the table. All of this was shaped, even my mom says, to the way I pack today and the structure that I have. All that came from being an athlete.
Yeah, there's a lot to be, I think, said for that. And I think for us growing up, and I'm the baby here, right? Like we were watching athletes, as we were, kids or young adults. And I think at that generation, like when they were done playing, they were done. You didn't see a lot of them anymore, or now like a lot of them go into commentary, or I feel like a lot of them have their own business and nonprofit, and they're realizing that like the would you say like the intellect or whatever that they got through athleticism is now helping them run a business or something. I mean, we got production companies out there, that Hall of Fame athletes have started, and they've got that structure and leadership through athletics at a probably a very early age too.
Yeah, yeah, that, and also just like you just said, recognizing what was missing when I was growing up. And just read a story about UConn's, one of their players, Rebecca Lobo, how when she had her children, she realized, like, I want to go into coaching. I want to be their coach. I want to be a role model, because the fact that there aren't a lot of women coaches. And so for her to be cognizant of that and to put it in play, not just really be about it, not just say it, that, again, that's because something was missing when she was growing up. And same thing that you said, it's now this movement where you're not pigeonholed into just kinetics or athletics. There's that, and look what else I can do.
I want to take this journey with y'all, and I want to try to see if we can set the conditions for it in a short amount of time. Listening to you talk, all I can think back on is like growing up and thinking of sports in general and the type of sports I watched. And the type of sports I watched is one thing, but then I tried to think about it through the lens of, did I ever see a woman in the sports I watched? And the only names that come to mind is Billie Jean King and Mary Lou Retton. And then I'm like, well, that's sad, because there was a whole bunch of other sport happening, but it's only Billie Jean King and Mary Lou Retton that come into my mind. And then I thought about it for a minute, and I'm like, those are two white women. So have I ever seen a woman of color growing up being an amazing athlete on the world stage? And then I'm left with FloJo, maybe FloJo, and I can't think of another one. And
Well,
I'm going
that's where
down
like the age gap helps me, because then I can go right to Serena and Venus. Right.
which is where I'm going with this, is that like from 1976 to 2025 in my generation, that's what I was exposed to. And then Joe comes along in 83 to 2025, and he's got this different exposure to these other athletes. Where am I going with this? It's a matter of the conditions being set for people to feel comfortable and confident in doing the things. And once you have that level of comfortability and confidence and encouragement and acceptance and belonging, then you can really play to the level that you're naturally and talented and developed to be able to play to. Susan, I looked at your bio, and it says here that you represented the United States and won the 60-meter in Korea 2017 World Masters Athletics Track and Field. And I'm like, well, that's pretty remarkable. I didn't know that until I just read that. And that is like, the celebration of that success is not necessarily something that you mentioned because you have this level of humility, but it's not even part of. It's gotten to, so how about this? It's gotten to a point that great success was made possible by the confidence and the skill and the talent and the development that got you to that point. But what you're really singing now is how you were able to take the lessons of all that, and then there's space now for you to do something beyond that. And celebrating what and that's at its core. And I'm rambling, but I'm not. I'm really going somewhere with all this. I think about UConn and the basketball team, the women's basketball team in UConn, and how they set so many records and so many things. But like when it comes to women's sports in general, it's been up until, as Joe alluded to, women in tennis, and then maybe even the way the WNBA is coming on the scene now and making a statement about equality and about equal pay and about representation. Mm-hmm. Like this is all like new conversations. And then I think about the disability space, and that's the parallel I'm trying to make here, is that like all of that, and then we add in the disability space and we think about how long it really takes for people to make a splash in an environment and to be accepted and to actually be like celebrated. I just need to get all of that off of my heart and mind. Y'all take all that and do something with it. I don't really know what I'm trying to say.
I think you're right too. I mean, because when was the ADA signed? 90, 80,
91.
91, right? And
90,
it's like, I mean, so now whatever I don't do math in public or especially on the internet, whatever that difference between then and now is, there's still a lot of things that aren't, the way that they should be based on the way that was written. And then you talk about like the 2010-ish U.S. women's soccer team who like,
right.
It wasn't until after that was when they were like, look, we just won again or something, like pay us,
Yeah.
And there's multiple documentaries out on it now, but yeah, I mean, and that took 10, 15 years and it's still just scratching the surface.
Well, it's a lot of what you said, definitely truth, a lot of truth, even going back. So it was 1999 and, I always put things, right, it's that equity lens, but it's also perspective, because perspective is around how it impacts you and how you see it and how you're involved in it. And so for me, not only do I remember the 1999, but I remember how, Gatorade and Nike and all those sponsors finally got behind, Mia Hamm and a lot of the other, the women's soccer, American Women's Soccer League, to promote this. And, that also sparked the whole, anything you can do, I can do better, with Mia Hamm and Michael Jordan. And so I remember it because I was still seeing some reflection and a part of me. And it's the whole mentality of, okay, we made it just a little bit, because with that also came in 1996, the WNBA. And again, the whole notion and what that documentary was, they got this bus that barely worked. Meanwhile, the men's, right, USA basketball team were flying, private jets, and they could barely get on a plane. And so you view these inequities like, well, but we got to keep going, because for us, we play the sport, We participate in the sport, but there's always this thing in the back of our mind that we're doing it to elevate the sport. So, when I think about how, if everything is already set for you and you have a level playing field, you are playing the sport. But imagine the weight of you have to play the sport and then you have to figure out how to elevate the sport.
Wow, yeah.
And so, yeah.
Yeah, the disability space. I mean, that's just what I know, right? I am not a woman of color, clearly. So I don't know that, but I am disabled and I do have my own invisible disabilities. And I had a daughter who had a wheelchair to navigate the world. And so I can speak to that with some level of understanding. And I can remember, to your point, the idea of like, if it's all level playing field, then Ainsley can just go do the race. But if it's not a level playing field, first you got to figure out how to get onto the playing field, period.
Yeah.
And then once you're there, you have this obligation, you have this duty, you have this responsibility to open the door for those behind you, to elevate the experience for everyone else. And how much of what a weight you're carrying, and how that weight can prevent you from jumping as high as you could if you didn't have that weight. Yeah.
Yeah.
For me, like, raising two small humans, like anytime we go somewhere, like even if it's just to the neighbor's house or their friend's house and they play, I'm like, hey, clean up. And like, oh, it was like that. I'm like, always leave it better than you found it, right? It's like we do that when we go camping, like that's ingrained in us in the Marine Corps, right? Like, hey, leave this better than you found it. And if you can elevate the sport or open the door for those behind you and set them up for success and leave it better than when you started, then that's the win right there.
Yep. You should put that on the shirt.
I remember what I said.
Right.
I have it recorded. It's recorded. Don't you worry.
Right.
But like, so how are you taking all of that right now with equity design and impacting the next generation to be able to know how to open these doors or to go into the doors that you've opened?
Yeah, the first thing, one of the things that we always do, and I say it to my team because it's something that I learned as a leader, is to, when we walk into spaces, we basically stay on the balcony. And so what that means is that you're observing, you're assessing. And so we're observing how people move in the spaces that are allocated to them. We're looking at how people interact with physical activity. We're looking at what's missing. And we don't solve the problem, but we create the space for the community to solve the problem. And then once we have the solution, that is what we work towards. So it's, when people say like, well, what's your next initiative? I don't know, because it's, and that's just the thrill of what we do, because we know that there are problems that need to be solved, but we really we're coached to the community around solving the inequities around physical activity.
I don't solve the problem. We set the condition for the community to solve the problem.
Yes.
Huge. And then it becomes like everybody has a vested interest in it. It's not just you singing from the top of the balcony. It's everyone wants to fix this collectively. And that's the power of together we shall accomplish so much more.
Actually, you would think, right, that when we come into the spaces, whether it's working with teachers or community or even youth, to say, think big, right? The amount of resistance that we get, the amount of the side eyes and the raised eyebrow, because there's a trust factor. So many other organizations or government entities came in and said, yeah, we'll do this for you, and just left the communities empty-handed or researched and never came back. And so what may take, right, in theory, like in Brownsville, the work that we did, in theory, it probably took about 3 or 4 months to actually design work with an organization that we work with, like called Street Lab. And, in theory, it took about 3 months. It actually took a year and a half. So we had to build trust. We had to, endure some of the side eye, because again, and then we had to, I firmly believe we are in the business of changing mindsets. If someone told you for like all these years, right, you grew up in a community that you're not going to, this isn't for you, we're not going to do this. And then here we come and we say, think big, dream big. We get a lot of, well, why do you want to do this here? Well, what do you mean you're going to change this? Why you're going to do it? So it may sound, but we spend years in just really making sure that we're developing and cultivating, fostering a true, genuine relationship with each of the communities we serve.
The key to what you just said is showing the end product. Because if you never show the end product, if you never allow the person who maybe gave you the side eye or doesn't have the trust when you're rolling in to actually feel and witness and be a part of the end product, then that's just going to continue. So when Brownsville, and by the way, is that in New York or Texas? It's in New York, right?
It's Brooklyn, New York.
Yeah. So Brownsville is in Brooklyn, New York. How are you after having Joe's hiding his face here? He's like, dude, I'm always about keeping the listener on their toes. So when you look at the success that you had in Brownsville after 18 months of working and cultivating and building trust and building the adaptive space and the accessible space, the equitable space, what are you doing now, I think, to celebrate those successes, to highlight those successes?
Yeah, we're going to have our ribbon cutting ceremony. We're going to, ensure that the community is there to be able to witness it. And then comes the other part of working with the school and the community on how to implement and use. And then we're going to find out if it really works, right? Because things were designed based off of a theory. Is it really working? Is it really having the impact? And if not, okay, how do we work together in making sure that we have the impact? Because again, a lot of times entities will come in, they'll redesign a space, and then, 4 or 5 years later, you're like, wait, wasn't this space redesigned? Well, that's because no one invested in the other part. No one showed up after all that work was done. So that's where we come.
That's huge. That's huge. I just saw a documentary about Katrina and the impacts that Katrina had in New Orleans and how they went in there and they rebuilt all these homes in the lower Ninth Ward and they put them in all these places. But they did it in a way that was fast and hastily, and there was nobody around to do repairs to these homes. And now some of these homes are basically unlivable now. And so you nailed it when you said, not only are we going to build it and we're going to cut some ribbons, but we're going to stay invested in the community to show people how to use what we've built and how to integrate it. And if it doesn't work, you're open. You put your pride to the side and say, I'm open to realizing it doesn't work and we need to reassess. That's brilliant.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, it's an investment.
Yeah, and like hearing you talk about the like 3 months to 18 months, I just got done listening to a podcast this morning and driving back from PT, and it was with an author, and he was talking about how like the publishing a book or a television show or a movie, like the studios and the backers and all these things, they want it now, and he's like, I have to put my foot down and say no. I'm going to put out a good product. This is the timeline, and has to follow this. Otherwise, you are going to build houses that aren't going to be able to suffice. If you don't start with that balcony, are you familiar with the 7 Habits of Highly Effective People?
Yes.
Yeah. It's one of those things is, seek first to understand. So that's that balcony, right? You're up there trying to understand. There it is, the talking stick.
Mm-hmm.
And there's other ones like, what is it? Like think win-win, begin with the end in mind.
Right.
Oh God. But those are all things, right? Like that have just been discussed. in their own way. And I think it's important that like people understand like the idea of Rome wasn't built in a day either. You know what I mean? Like it's going to take time. 10 years ago, Rooster and I were running and we were at a red light at an intersection about a mile from his house. And he was like, I want to be in 50 states in 50 days. It wasn't that drastic, but yeah, he was like, I want to be in all 50 states. And I was like, dude, we're in 4. Hold on. So we had this like growth and scale conversation with, the other leaders, and it's worked out great, right? It's the quality over quantity type of thing. And yeah, you just have to, like you said, get with the team and figure out, hey, what is going to be best for, in your case, the community. I do have a question though, because I'm dumb. Brownsville is in Brooklyn, right? Got it. I definitely knew it was in Texas because you're in New York. I, for whatever reason, as I'm looking at a map of New York, I thought you were only in like the Bronx. Is that so? Are you like not 7 cities, boroughs?
So yeah, so we are all boroughs. We gravitate towards wherever there's low physical activity engagement, and so we work. So right now, majority of the work that we do is in the Bronx, but we're also in Brownsville, so that's Brooklyn. We're in Queens, and we had our first site visit in June in Staten Island. So so we have and also East Harlem. So yeah.
What kind of research are you guys doing to know that East Harlem and Brownsville and the site in Staten Island needs you? How are you getting that information?
So with the New York City and New York State Department of Health, and also with the Robert Wood Johnson Foundation. So every year the foundation puts out the rankings of counties throughout the United States. So from the furthest south to the furthest north to west to east. And so the idea is that it takes a look at all of the disparities, whether it's socioeconomic, life expectancy, child infancy rate. All of these factors are taken into consideration in scoring each county. So what happens is the local Department of Health sends out a report, and then the state, and then nationwide. So we get all of the reports and then take a look at, all right, where do we need to be, and what is currently happening in each of those boroughs or counties.
Well, I feel like I should know this. What was that report? The Robert what Foundation?
So this the Robert Wood Johnson Foundation.
And you've been doing this. I mean, equity design has been around since how long now?
So since 2019, and then in 2021 we became operational.
Yes. And the team that you surround yourself with, they all just have the similar passions. They all come to your team for different reasons. What would you say makes like your core team click? Like I'm looking on your website and I see 5 people in a picture, and they all are smiling brightly and in their own ways. Like what makes this leadership team click to be able to do this?
Yeah.
Is it Coach T?
Yes. So
this dude Rooster is like you. He'll like grab a phone, slide into a whole giant crowd of people, like take a picture, and he's a big boy like you. So he's like voice to be heard.
I see him right there. I'm pretty sure that gentleman I'm looking at is Chris Morrison. Is that right?
Yeah.
Is it not Chris?
We have Coach T, Talik Norman, who just recently became a dad. So yes. So
is that who you're all talking about? That'll just grab a phone?
Yes.
Okay. Mr. Norman. So he's your program design associate, born and raised in the Bronx. All right. Go ahead.
So so I've actually known him when I was the executive director of Fit for Life NYC. And he was one of the first, him and his fiance were one of the first coaches and teachers we hired. And we just continued to stay connected. So, there was a merger and acquisition that happened with Fit for Life NYC, and both Talik and Chris said, well, I know that the next step is your own boss lady. And at first, I didn't get what they were saying, because it's scary going out on your own. But they helped me tremendously, and so they're a rock in the foundation, along with Elizabeth. So those are the core team members that we have.
How do they set you up each day to succeed as their leader? How do your people set you up to be a great leader?
So they believe in the mission, and they believe in me and carrying out that mission. And so the first thing that came to mind was we were doing an initiative in the South Bronx where this particular school, they were going to lose their play yard. And so it's the play yard, right? So in New York City, right, recess sometimes the schoolyard is actually the public park, right? So it's shared space. And so the park was going to be taken away for the next 3 to 5 years. And they were concerned, well, if that's the case, I mean, imagine, right, having recess for 3 years indoors, not able to go outside because of all this construction. So we worked with the Department of Transportation, we worked with another organization, and we were able to figure out to have recess on the open street. What this meant was, the concern, we brought the community in, we brought the teachers in, and the concern was, well, but on the open street, we have everything from drug deals to, substance abuse to crime. How dare you say that our kids are going to go out and play on an open street? So I remember it was this one individual that was really very loud, sort of in your face. And it was a gentleman. And I remember catching eyes with Talik, like, it's okay, I got this. And so he was expressing his concern because he was scared. It had nothing to do with me, right? And he was saying that, well, what if this happens? There was a shooting this time and this, and now you're saying that you're going to put our kids in harm's way. And he just needed to get that off his chest. And while his delivery wasn't the best, I also understood, well, how many other opportunities did this man have to be able to say that he really cares about the community? And so I gave him the space to do that, but it was a lot to take in. And I remember afterwards, they were all like, you okay, boss lady? And I remember I was like, I just got to jog this off. And so there's no doubt that they got my back. There's no doubt that, they give me the space to be me. And I also give them the space to say, well, how would you do that? What's your perspective? So it's, we got each other's back. And I couldn't be more prouder of being able to see them grow and flourish in the way that is also best for them and best for the communities we serve.
It speaks right to the Together We Shall mindset that this podcast represents. It's how you can surround yourself with people and you can have this collective, maturity, but also collective respect for one another and your roles and your responsibilities. Yeah, that's special.
Right.
I'm happy that I asked that question because I really was curious, and to hear your answer doesn't surprise me, but it really reinforces, again, just how important it is to have synergy and open lines of communication. Joe?
Yeah. Yep. No, I mean, and that's like, I think that's why we at Ainsley's Angels are, successful. And we can define success in many different ways, but we built a pretty damn good team. Rooster built a damn good team really from the ground up, and it's allowed us to be synergetic, sustain, grow, make an impact. I mean, I don't know what I don't know because I don't remember, and I don't think I've ever even asked you, Rooster, like in, we'll say summer of 2011 when this idea was, or fall, right, 2011, when this idea was prompted, like you didn't see 14 years later being in 62 cities and 30 states and, raising hundreds of thousands of millions of dollars, right?
No, I didn't. But I think to your point, it's about creating a team that's has that synergy and that collectiveness. And earlier, the main answer that you gave, Maurelhena, was that they believed in the mission, and that mission was pure. They believed in the mission. They believed in you to lead them into that direction. And I think, Joe, to answer your question, while I didn't necessarily envision where we are today back then, I did know that if it was going to truly be something so much bigger than any one person, or if I was going to truly honor Ainsley's legacy and lead that effort, it needed to be done in the most purest way. And it sounds to me like, Maurelhena, that's what you're doing, is you're executing purely. And if anything deviates from pure, you're going to stop it.
Don't bring out those guns.
Yeah. Well, what
flex on them. Look, Rooster.
No, I'm not getting showed up. I've seen them things anyway.
That's why I was safe in Portland. I was like, right. No one messing with me.
Well, what's interesting, what you said, Rooster, from an HR perspective, it's, hire slow and, really take the time that's needed to make sure the individuals or the team members that are coming in understand and really, really know how to carry out or want to know how to carry out the mission. And I remember, she's on the website as well, Faith. And I got I was interviewing for this fellowship program, and, that fellow would then be placed with equity design. And, she said that she's not going to do the fellowship, but she really wanted to be a part of equity design and the mission. I was like, okay. And so I always believe in giving everyone a chance. So she came on as an intern. And I remember we were out on the open street. We worked with USA Cycling and local cyclists to bring cycling to the South Bronx. And I remember saying on the open street, man, we really need to get a barricade to close off that street down the block. And then I blinked, and she went and put a barricade on. Well, mind you, she's a shot putter, but she put a barricade on her back and was just walking down there. And I remember saying to Talik, that's our team member.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, when you know. Yeah. I know we have countless similar stories to that. But I do want to take you back to the idea of, like you said, hire slow, which is essentially scale. And Joe mentioned earlier that I wanted, at the mile from my house, I wanted to be in all 50 states. And that's when he was able to come in and provide that level of temperance, which is essentially this guidance to scale, this guidance to have quality over quantity. And as you grow this process, you have to have the right design in place in order to have a framework. And today, the way that we bring new people onto our team is way different than we did 10 years ago. And it's different in a better way because it's very intentional and it's very slow and methodical. And we're arming them with the knowledge they need. So just like Faith, you knew what you saw in her when she threw that barricade, and just did her thing like a shot putter. But what you also saw was like these qualities, these intangibles in her that led you to know we can arm her with the knowledge to be an amazing team member with equity design. And that's what Yeah, and that's the beauty of it. So if you were rushing, like, hey, we need 4 new people, like by the end of the week, you might have just picked 4 new people who just look like they played the part. But at the end of the day, you would have missed faith because you wouldn't have had those intangibles recognized. I love that. The other
Absolutely.
the other thing that you said earlier that I thought was something I probably should have asked you to bring up earlier, was you said in New York City, the outside recess areas are sometimes the public park. Like mind blowing to anyone who doesn't live in New York City to think about that and the impacts of that.
Yeah.
And it's
I want to hear the end state of the in the street. Yeah, that situation. Like, did that school, was it you got them in the street and Faith got a
Yeah.
barricade and everyone got it? You know, it's funny because if you would have told me 5-ish years ago like how important recess is, I wouldn't have. It would have been in one ear and out the other. But now having an 8 and 6-year-old boy, like, their mental well-being is totally different if they don't get outside for that 20 minutes and just run.
Yeah. Yeah.
Crazy.
It's we actually we work with the Department of Education. It's a division that looks at incidents that occur. And incidents can be anything from bullying all the way to, someone tripping and falling. And so what we do is we look at the data and, well, they look at the data and say, these are the schools that have the highest level of incidents. And then we go back and we essentially find out the why behind all of these incidents. And a lot of the time, 100% of the time, it's during recess or some form of physical activity. So maybe PE. And, we actually interview the kids, which is the best part of, doing this. And all of the kids will say, we wish we had a longer period of time to be able to be outside, to be able to run and play. But then to the other part of it is because some of the places are public spaces, there's safety concerns, it's concrete that needs to be surfaced, so all of these, there's this perspective from the adult mindset and then their perspective of the kids mindset. And then we have to work, right, to figure out how do we meet each of them in the middle. But recess is huge to a point where there's a policy in New York City to ensure that everyone has access to recess.
That's awesome. And it's like, and Rooster knows, like, but my wife's a teacher and she teaches where the boys go to school. And we've had these conversations. God, I don't know. She's in her 17th, 18th this year of teaching, first grade and or third grade, so small ones. But like, we've had these conversations like recently, probably more so in the last 3 years, as my son oldest went kindergarten, first grade, second grade, and it's like, I'm not saying the education structure in at least North Carolina, right, is wrong, but it is broken for sure. Like, you're asking from 7:30 to 3:30 an 8-year-old to sit at a desk and he gets whatever 20 minutes for lunch, 20 minutes for recess. Like, I mean, I'm 40 and can't do that. Rooster,
Right.
He's always like, well, gotta go walk time and take the dog and gotta move, all right. That's what we talk about, move. But
Mhm.
yeah, I get it. We're moving, we as in the education system is moving these kids' minds, which is great. But I just like, I feel like they're trapped. And I see that in my oldest son more than ever. It's like it's I don't know. I don't want to say it's heartbreaking, and I God knows I don't have the answer, but it was literally something I was thinking about the other day when he got home from school, and and like no recess because it was raining, and just like I had to sit at my desk all day and listen to this lady all day. And I'm like, yeah,
Right.
dude, it sucks. I'm sorry. There's nothing I can do for you, and you got 10 more years of it.
Right.
I just wonder, like, as all these things that like are dare I say, like modernizing or changing, right, within technology and education. I'm definitely not saying give them tablets and AI, but it's like there's got to be some studies out there that shows like, yes, they need recess, and they also need something else other than like, PE, some other element of movement to help them, and I think that would be like if there was, in the school day, three things, right? PE, recess, and then I don't want to say PE2, but something else where they were able to move for a little bit. I would imagine that the teachers would see more like attentiveness and dedication to the work in between those things. But I don't know what I don't know.
Oh, no, you're absolutely correct. Absolutely correct. I had the privilege to, work and teach and coach in the public, the private, and the charter schools. And one of the things, and there's something to take away from each, right? And so one of the things I learned in the private schools is, to your point, they're given all of those opportunities. So during the day, they have the different breaks that are set up for them. It's more a collaborative building and learning. And, so there's all of these things. And then, we lead with empathy to understand schools and teachers. And one of the things is, unfortunately, is at least here in New York, is that everything is a state test curriculum. And as a teacher, sometimes it's whether or not you're going to have a contract for the next year. It's based off of whether your students are passing their state tests or have a high score on their state test. So it's performative, and the study shows, and they all know that it has to be a holistic approach, as opposed to, nope, we have to focus on performative and state. So yeah, you're right, Joe.
It's like, what is it, like bring back wood shop and home ec and stuff?
Yeah.
Like get like that. That's like in my mind, right, too, like another element of that movement, right? Like let them do something else, right? I mean, those were and those are valuable skills too, home ec and wood shop, right? Learning, how to, I don't want to say make a cake, but stuff in, woodworking and trades, like that stuff is, I wish I had that. And add finance to the curriculum, and we'll be good.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, you mentioned the phrase "run and play" and how important that is. And you were using examples of your own kids, Joe. And immediately I wrote down "run and play," and then underneath it I wrote down the word "barriers." In other words, what are the barriers to run and play? And we all get the run piece, and we'll call that move. But the play piece is that home ec and that cook, shop and those types of things where you can play with your mind and use your hands to create things. But it's the barriers, I think, that sometimes we don't pause to think about. In the disability awareness space, obviously, there's the barriers to accessibility from a disability standpoint. Your wheels can't go over it and those types of things. But one of the things that Maurelhena has mentioned more than once is like the physical barriers and the impacts that the environment has in the inner city and the concrete versus the soft space. But the other thing that comes to mind is like the cultural barriers. And then how different cultures, when they're put into different situations, may act differently. And I was wondering, how does equity design kind of meet the challenges of cultural barriers when you're creating these safe, equitable spaces?
Listen, what's interesting is that movement, there's a universal language when it comes to movement and play. And so I remember one of the schools, it was a school in Queens. They had a high number of incidents, and we were working with the school aides, and we saw this, we saw this division, and the school aides came to us and said, like, we don't really understand the culture as it relates to play. Because some of them were from the Philippines, they were from China. The school was this melting pot, but they weren't they weren't taking advantage of that. And so what we did was we tapped into each of the school aids culture and asked them, well, what did you play when you were growing up? All right. And especially since the school itself had a large Asian demographic. So, well, let's go with those games. Let's go with those activities. Let's speak their language when it comes to play and movement. And, it was the best thing possible because, again, it's us coming in. It's almost like they knew that that was the solution, but it took us coming in to say, you're absolutely right. We verify that, give you a blue check and everything. And so when we think about barriers, there are ways around the barriers. And some people think that the solutions cost millions and millions of dollars. It doesn't. It really takes talking to people and asking them, how do you think we should solve this?
Yeah, giving them a seat at the table, letting them have a voice, letting them part of the solution, letting the community fix the problem. Full circle.
Yes. Yes.
Wow. Yeah, it's really special work, and the intentionality into which you all deploy creating the plan and creating the design is noteworthy. Really, really awesome the way that you set those conditions.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah, and I bet, I mean, like, again, looking at this map, and I don't know what I don't know, but like the diversity, the cultural diversity in New York City, right? Like that school in South Bronx, the one in Queens, the one in Brownsville, the one in Staten Island, right? Yeah, they're all New York. They are all probably different, right?
Yeah.
It's significantly different. It's not like when I lived in Virginia Beach, right? Which was there 15, 18 high schools, right? And yeah, they're a little different, but they're not, nothing's drastically different, where in those such a dense populated area, yeah, that I can imagine the difficulty that can bring, but also the reward when you fix it.
Yeah, and it's with each of the schools and each of the communities, the first thing that when we first connect with our staff members, so like a Talib, Elizabeth, or Faith, we find out, okay, what's the research? What are the data points of each of these communities or each of the schools? What's the demographics? What's the socioeconomic? What's the culture? And so we arm ourselves with this information, and then we do a walk around the community. We're doing asset mapping, all of these things to get a better understanding of how this particular community moves. And I remember in Queens, it was, we had this school, the Jackie Onassis School, and it was right after the height of the pandemic. And we had to, in New York City, you're talking about, 30 to 35 students, in a classroom setting. And so they had to look towards outdoor spaces to be able to, adhere to the social distancing, et cetera. And so the school was able to receive a permit to close down the street and extend their classroom. And this school had like all of these banners. It had like bicycle parking stations for adults and kids. It was awesome. And then, we went across the street, and the school was the Harriet Tubman School. And the yard, there was nothing in the yard. It was like night and day. But the biggest difference is that on one side of the street with the Jackie Onassis were houses, private houses. And on the Harriet Tubman side, it was complexes, rentals. And so just being able to look like, wow, this is like within meters of each other. And then, but there's disparities. And it's something and then it's just two different cultures. So our approach to each of the schools, we can't say what we're using here at Jackie Onassis, we're going to use for Harriet Tubman. There's just no way. It's a totally different framework that needs to be set up.
Yeah, what a dynamic. Wow. And all the while you're fighting those internal thoughts of like, why is this so different?
Yeah.
Once, and we know why systemically, we understand why.
Right.
But like, how do we affect change on that? And then it's like, well, that's a whole nother podcast or a whole nother business or a whole other passion. But I just acknowledging it, I guess, helps you to create and to meet those two different entities where they are. Acknowledging it.
It's acknowledging it, and you know, our team will say the same. It's like it just weighs on your heart because you're like, man, there's just so much work that needs to be done, so much work. And you know, we're small and mighty team, but realizing like it's going to take years and the funding, the capital, et cetera, to really make the changes and have the impact. So we have to always figure out, well, what is it that we can do, you know, so that each of the communities we serve, you know, whether it's a school, whether it's a center, they're able to sustain it long past equity design.
It's crazy too, because like I looked it up, right? And you know, like you said, there's two schools are just across the street and they're both public schools, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. And you can tell just from the Google Maps, you know, and the fields and the park, everything, like one is better than the other. And it's literally one block away.
It begs the question, like public schools, that means it comes from public school dollars. Like, do we have like a different amount going one way and a different going the other way? And how's that possible?
Well, so
101st Street's the divider. The money can't cross 101st.
Yeah. Well, the other thing is, right, when you think about, I know like in some parts of Jersey, right, when families are thinking of moving from New York to Jersey, the first thing they do is they look at the school district, and then they look at, oh, wow, the property taxes are really high in this district versus this district. But they also know that's because where their money is going. So it's such an interesting dynamic around that. It's that the census, you know, all of these things play a role into what resources each of the schools and public areas like the parks receive.
So here's the question. Based on the amount of revenue created by taxes, are you perhaps making an argument that the Onassis school versus the Harriet Tubman school are receiving an equitable amount of the tax revenue?
Oh, they're not.
They're not, you know? And it's like, well, like, why not? And that maybe is rhetorical. Maybe you know the answer. I don't know.
So there's more subsidies that our theory is that there's more subsidies that need to go into the Harriet Tubman School versus the Jackie Onassis schools. And when we say subsidies, you know, the Harriet Tubman School might be a Title I school, which receives more city funding and resources going to students with IEPs and their other challenges. You know, the Jackie Onassis School may have a very strong PTA working class, you know, where they're able to put money into the PTA and fund it, you know, fund other initiatives, you know, whereas at Harriet Tubman, you know, that again, just being across the street, same zip code, but that section, the socioeconomic may be different. So all of these things play such a huge role into, you know, the resources that go into a school.
Absolutely. And I'm glad that you answered that question as opposed to just chalking it up as rhetorical, because I think there's education to be had there to understanding some of those details. And at this point, you know, in the podcast, we've been at it over an hour, and I think we could go easily for another hour. We got to start to wind this thing down. Traditionally, how we do it is we ask our guests to kind of give us something to leave us with, basically, you know, final thoughts. I don't know where you want to take those final thoughts, but at the end of the day, I do want to say, like, thanks for making the time and thanks for accepting the invitation. I think I know I learned some things today, and I'll toss it over to Joe before you have your final words. But it's really cool to spend some time with you today.
Same here.
No,
Same.
yeah, the same. And I know, like, God, I mean, this was a year in the making, but it's right. Rome wasn't built in a day, and
Mhm.
got to just slow and steady wins the race type of thing.
Yep.
But it's always great, to be in your presence, whether in person or virtually. I really enjoy like speaking to you and listening to you speak, and like the passion that you have for change is top notch. I really appreciate it, and honored to call you a friend for sure.
Wow. Thank you. Thank you. Gosh, I was just thinking, what you said, last words, even to thinking about what both you and Joe do, we're the face of change. And I think the fact of knowing that change needs to take place, within the dynamic or the sphere of how things are impacting both personally, locally, even worldwide. The fact that to step in the ring and say, I'm going to be the face of change, that takes a lot of guts. And so I appreciate this opportunity because we're in the work knee deep, and a lot of times you don't get a chance to just take a breath and to talk about it. And so I appreciate this platform to, one, talk about it, but also as we're speaking, as you and Joe were speaking, like, wow, we're the face of change. And I appreciate each of you for the chance to use this platform to really talk about that.
We're done. This was good.
Yeah, we're done here.
Find your people, and if they make you feel sexy, even better.